Hi all, welcome to my YouTube channel. In today's session, we will be discussing about constructor and self variable. Now, let us move into constructor. So, underscore underscore init underscore underscore bracket is a special method called a constructor for initializing the instance variable of a class. It's an initialization of instance variable of a class. So, whenever you create an object, it will be the first method or an first special method which will be called itself or initialize the variables of a class. So when you create an object for the class, this constructor will be automatically called and it initializes the class variables. So that's what the operation it will do whenever you create an object for the class. So the object will be the instantiation of the class. When you instantiate the class, the constructor will be automatically called and it will create the memory space or it will initialize the class variables. So once you initialize, the memory allocation will be happen for class variables. And a constructor is called only at the time of creating an instance. So creating an instance means creating an object. So as I said before, it's a class instance. So since object is a class instance, the constructor is only called once at the time of creating an instance. When we create an object, then only the constructor will be called. It takes self as a default first parameter and also takes few more argument as an input. So here, the constructor can take self as a first parameter by default. So, and you may even pass few more arguments into the constructor. Now, in this example, we have did the process of constructor without arguments. Here, we have not at all defined any of the arguments in this function, but we could able to pass arguments to the constructor also. So now you can see here a class in the example class A def in itself self dot name Ravi and self def self is student name self name age is age. So in this way you could able to define. So that's what the example explains here. So here we have an self as a first parameter and doesn't have any of the arguments. So this is constructor without arguments. Here when you call the constructor, the self.name is Rama we have given by default. So if you want to pass any of the additional arguments, you could make use of constructor with arguments. Now let us run the constructor with arguments. Now let me define a class. So class student. So here I will define a constructor init self dot name. I will just define a name here. So self dot name is equal to name. So I'm giving the formal argument as a name, and with the help of self variable, I'm defining its name. Right? So now I will define one more function def to self each. So for your convenience, I'm just giving the example which will be commonly used. Like for your understanding sake, I'm giving this type of examples because it will be easy for understanding purpose. Now self dot age is equal to age. Now if you want to print f string name of the student is self dot name and his path or age is self dot age. So here you could able to understand the concept here. Now this is the class. So here we have a constructor, we have a method. These are my class variables. So once after defining the constructor, it has self as an first parameter. So self is an first parameter, but in the previous case, it doesn't have any of the argument. But here I'm passing an formal argument as name. So now the user can give actual argument and pass a value to this formal argument, and you could able to make use of that to print certain data. After defining a formal argument with the help of self variable self.name is equal to name, I could able to declare the class variable. Later, with the help of class method, I could able to get one more data age. So here my class method is show, and I have taken the formal argument as age. Since self is an first parameter in the class, we don't want to bother about it. So we are using age as a formal argument, and I'm declaring this with the self parameter self.age is equal to age. Now I'm printing the classes variables. So first, with the help of a string, I print name of the student is self.name and his or her age is self.age. So after declaring this variable, now I will declare an object. Now object1 is equal to student. So in order to pass a actual argument to the constructor, you need to define the name here itself. So I'm passing Arjun as my first argument, which will be given to the constructor, that is name. Then I will call the object normal dot show function. So here I will pass his age as 27. Now if I print this, you could able to see name of the student is Arjun and his or her age is 27. And if, as I said, objects can be used to create multiple copies of the variable. So you would able to create object2 is equal to student Raksha, then object2 dot, so let her age should be 20. If I try to create this, so name of the student is Raksha and his or her age is 20. Now let us move to self variable. We have seen the self as the first parameter in the class. So what is self? So self is a variable which will be used as a first parameter for a class. So it will be default variable. So instead of self, so you could able to make use of any other variables. But to maintain some industrial standards, we should make use only self as a first parameter, which will be well common and it will be easily understand for our other programs when you are working in our project. So now let us look into self variable. So self is a default variable that contains the memory address of the current object. So this variable will contains the memory address of this object. So whenever you call an object for the class, so the self variable will contains the memory address of this object. So when you declare an object to the class, so the object will have some memory address and this memory address will be stored into this self variable. This variable is used to refer all the instance variables and methods. So this variable is used to access all the instance variable and methods. So it is used to access all the methods and variables. Now self is the first argument to any object method because the first argument is always the object reference. So self will be added as default parameter because it will be acting as a memory address for each and individual object. So hence it will be the default one. You don't want to add explicitly any other variable. So anyhow, if you pass only single argument also, the single argument for a class, it is considered as argument 1 itself because even though it has two formal arguments, self and name, self is considered as internal or default argument for a class. Hence, there won't be any error pop-up. As I said, def underscore init self and def disp self. So whenever you define any constructor method or any method, so self will be the first parameter and it will be the object reference. So it will contain the memory address of each individual object. Then only you could able to create the multiple copies of this class. So that's the completion of constructor and self variable. Thank you.